Hey again, beautiful human. Welcome back to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman. And in the lead up to our very special season 3 launch, we are continuing our countdown of the top 5 episodes of all time of this show. Today, we are on number 3, which is super exciting. It was episode 18 on how to create content consistently without burning out. This is such an important episode. And obviously, I talk about this topic a lot, but I think this episode really encapsulated so many of the principles that I teach on how to create content consistently and stick with it without burning out. Really, really important. In this episode, I shared a simple 5-step system to help you repurpose, batch, and streamline your content so that you can stay consistent without the stress. Let's dive in. Hey, beautiful human. You're listening to Bold Women in Business, the show where strategy meets soul in marketing, branding, and business growth. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, messaging and branding strategist, content queen, and compulsive meaning maker. Every week, I'll help you ditch the cookie cutter playbook and build a brand that actually sounds like you, sells like hell, and feels so damn good to show up for. Let's get bold. So I've got this friend that I meet with about once every 3 months or so, and he's also an entrepreneur, and we kind of meet to, catch up, but also just to support each other in our entrepreneurial journeys. And we just met this past week, and he asked me a question that as soon as he asked it, I was like, I need to talk about this on the podcast because this is such a common problem and so important for pretty much any entrepreneur to understand. So here's the problem he was facing. He's a coach, and he said he's in this constant cycle. He puts effort into his marketing. He's, putting videos out on social media. He's sending out emails to his list. He's doing outreach. He's doing all the things for his marketing, and he gets this flood of clients, and he then gets super busy with client work that he just pauses his marketing. He's able to coast for a while because he just got this influx of clients, and those clients are signing up for 3-month packages or 6-month packages or something like that. So he's got a good base of clients. But then once those clients have kind of run through their packages, and if they're not ready to renew, now he's left in this situation where he hasn't been investing in his marketing for the last 2, 3, 4, however many months because he's been busy with client work and he hasn't had the time or headspace to think about his marketing. And now he almost has to start back over because he's back at square one. He hasn't done the marketing that has a kind of long tail, right? When I put out a blog post or a social media post, or I have content marketing blitz going on, I'm not going to necessarily see the results of those efforts immediately, right? It takes some time for people to get familiar with your content and see it enough times that they want to actually work with you. So in many cases, you don't necessarily see the direct impact of the content marketing efforts that you're putting out there for months sometimes. So if you're busy with client work and you're not focusing on your marketing for all those months, that work that could have resulted in a steady stream of clients now needed to have been done, 2-3 months ago. And now you have to kind of start back over. So he said, I have this challenge. Is this normal? And I just laughed because this is a problem that I think pretty much every entrepreneur faces, right? That feast or famine cycle, especially solopreneurs or people running small businesses. And honestly, it's a challenge that I face all the time. I mean, I'm super transparent pretty much across the board that I deal very much with the shoemaker's children problem, right? Where I'm so good at doing this for other people. But when it comes to my own marketing, it's a little harder to stay consistent. I've been much better this year so far, knock on wood. Hopefully that will continue, but I do struggle with it because it's really, really hard to balance the content marketing that needs to be happening on an ongoing basis with client work, especially when you're inundated with client work. How do you balance all of that? So that's what I want to talk about in today's episode. I want to give you 5 things that you need to focus on to really tackle your content marketing in a way that is sustainable, achievable, and effective. It's not about doing everything at once. You're not going to be able to do everything at once. I promise you that. It's about finding the things that are going to really have an impact for you, for your business, and for your audience, and that you can manage and balance with your client work. So let's get into it. Okay, step one, you need to get crystal clear on your ideal client. Who are you actually speaking to? I know that this might sound like an extra step before we're actually creating the content, but it is so, so, so important. If you do not take this step before you start producing content, I guarantee you that content you create is going to fall flat because you don't know who you're speaking to. You don't know how you're speaking to them. You don't know where you're speaking to them. And you could be putting a lot of effort into something that is just not yielding results and is just not going to yield results. So what you need to do is really ask yourself, who am I trying to attract here? Who is my ideal client? What are their pain points? What are their desires? What are the challenges that they're facing? What are the struggles they're going through? And really think about their emotional world. Right? What is it that you're solving for them? You also want to ask, what type of content are they consuming? Right? Are they consuming long form blogs or quick TikTok videos, deep dive podcasts? Really think about your ideal client. So let's just say you are a coach and you work with busy, overwhelmed, overworked moms, okay? You have to think about what kind of content is a super busy, stretched thin mom going to consume. I think it's probably fair to assume that someone like that is not going to have the time to sit down and read a 20-page blog post. It's just not likely. Maybe if you have an audio version at the top of your blog post page, maybe that's a way that they would consume that content. But sitting down and reading a long form article is probably not going to be the right thing for your audience. Now, of course, you know your audience better than I do, so maybe I'm wrong here, but there are some assumptions that we can make. They might be more likely to consume short, practical, easy to follow TikTok videos. Maybe audio content is more palatable. Maybe that's more doable. So think about, what kind of content is my audience likely to consume? And finally, you want to ask, where are they hanging out online? A busy mom who's trying to live a more fulfilled life, whether that's from a spiritual perspective or physical perspective or in her relationships or what have you, she's probably not hanging out primarily on LinkedIn, unless you're specifically helping people with their careers, right? There's kind of different aspects to what you're helping people with. So you have to think about also, where are they likely hanging out? Are they hanging out in forums on Facebook? Are they hanging out on YouTube? Do they love scrolling on Instagram Reels? You really have to think about, where am I likely to find my ideal clients? So that's step one. We want to really, really understand who we're trying to attract before we start creating content that's going to speak to that audience. Step two, create core content pillars. Instead of trying to just create content that's about anything and everything that your audience might care about, or anything and everything that you might be able to offer to your audience, and you probably have a lot of things that you can offer them, really think about, what are the 3 to 5 things that I want to really, really hone? I want to be known for those things. Sometimes even 3 is too many. There are people who specialize in one thing. And every video you see from them, and every blog post you read from them, and every email you get from them is about the same basic topic. And that's actually a really, really good thing. You don't have to focus on one thing, but I would say don't focus on more than 3 to 5. Think about, what are the buckets of topics that I really want to be known for? And don't be afraid of repeating yourself. Think about the people who you follow. You have people that you follow, and you watch their videos, and you read their blog posts, and you read their emails, and you engage with their content. And you know this person is an expert in whatever arena that is, right? You want to be known as the expert in the thing that you do, the thing that you do better than anyone else. And so thinking about, what is it that I do better than anyone else? And thinking about, what are the things that I can talk about in a really deep way? What can I dive deep on? Instead of just going broad, we want to really, really go deep on topics. So think about, what are those content pillars that are going to drive the content that you put out. Pro tip, AI can be so helpful when it comes to thinking about your content pillars and the content that comes out of those pillars. So if you're having a hard time thinking about, okay, what are the pillars that drive my content? Go over to ChatGPT and describe. And it doesn't have to be described in the clearest way possible. Describe just in as much detail as you can. Who do you work with? What is their pain point? What do you do? How do you help them? Right? And you can just brain dump in there and then ask ChatGPT, give me 3 to 5 content pillars that I could dive really deep on with my content. And then you can ask ChatGPT to give you, 100 content ideas for each of those content pillars. Now, many of those ideas might not be any good, but a lot of them are going to be good starting points for you. And so it's a really good way of starting to think through, how can I structure this in a way that's really achievable? All right, step 3 is deciding on your content formats and platforms. You do not need to be everywhere, and you do not need to be producing every type of content. We just talked about your audience and what kind of content they consume and where they're hanging out. That's not going to be true for every part of your audience, right? You have a bunch of individuals who make up your audience, and different people are going to be hanging out in different places and are going to prefer different types of content. You do not need to appeal to everyone. You need to appeal to the average, right? The average of your audience. Part of picking the formats and platforms that are best for you are, yes, what your audience wants to consume. That's probably number one, but also what you like to create. Right? If you are a writer and you love to use the written word to express yourself, well, then blog posts and LinkedIn newsletters and email, those are going to be really, really good options for you. If you prefer audio format, then maybe starting a podcast is a great idea. Or maybe pairing an audio version of a blog post would be a really great way of kind of tackling both. Long form content like podcasts, YouTube videos, blog posts, these are really good for building authority. They're really, really good for SEO. While short form content like social media posts, reels, TikTok videos, these engage and attract your audience. Email marketing is really important for nurturing and converting your audience. So all of these different types of content are important for different purposes and different audiences, and what you prefer is a big factor in this. Now, in an ideal world, you are creating some short form content and some long form content, some content that's designed to nurture your audience and some content that's designed to attract new audience members. But we don't live in an ideal world, right? That's the point of this episode. I want you to come away with a really sustainable idea of how can I create content in a way that I'm not going to just create a bunch of content and then completely fall off the off the planet, right? While I'm working on client work and then come back to it later and have to restart, right? I want you to have something that is sustainable even while you're doing client work so that your marketing is always happening. The key really is to figure out what is going to be most sustainable for you. So again, lean into the formats and the platforms that feel most comfortable for you and that feel most achievable for you. And that's really what's going to form the basis of your content marketing plan. And yeah, when you have some more time, maybe you have a little bit more of a lull in client work, now is the time to add on, right? So if, for example, you really love creating short form reels that are just fun and engaging, and that's easy for you to create on a sustainable basis. Maybe when you have a little bit of a lull in client work, you add in a little bit more blogging or you add in a little bit of longer form video and you kind of mix it up that way. Quick pause. Can we talk about content for a second? If you're staring at a blank screen more often than you're hitting post, it might be because you're trying to create content that doesn't fit your actual strengths. It's kind of like wearing someone else's jeans. They may look super good on your friend, but you put them on and they are not comfortable and they just aren't doing your butt any favors. That's why I created the Content Marketing Power Type Quiz. It's free and it helps you figure out the kind of content you were made to create. The kind of content that feels natural, sustainable, and actually connects with your people in a way that lights you up. In just 45 seconds, or maybe even 30 if you're quick about it, you're going to find out your power type and get custom recommendations to make content feel easier and more effective. Head on over to honeybeebold.com/quiz. That's HONEYBEBOLD.com/quiz. Take it and then DM me your result because I kind of need to know. All right, let's dive back into the episode. All right, step 4 is creating a repurposing system. This is really what's going to help you kind of check a lot of boxes at once. We want to work smarter, not harder. So just as an example, I'm recording this podcast episode right now. I'm then going to take this podcast episode, create show notes for it to put it on my blog, which is really good for more SEO value on my website. Then I'm going to pull some key takeaways, put it into an Instagram carousel. And I'll also take little snippets from this episode to post on Instagram and LinkedIn, which are my two main platforms that I post on. I'll also send this episode out in an email newsletter to my list that goes out every week. And honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many pieces of content that I can create from this one core piece of content. That's where it becomes really important to figure out what is my core format for content. Again, if you prefer video content or audio content or written content, figure out what is the thing that you really enjoy creating and create something as your pillar piece of content, your core piece of content. And then you can create so much content from that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, right? It's really about maximizing each piece of content. Step 5 is batching your content. This makes such a difference. When I do this, it helps me so much. I feel like I'm just on top of everything. It's so much easier. I feel like I can breathe and like my content is just kind of running in the background because I've done that work to really batch my content, create a bunch at once, and get it done in advance. I'm not always great about doing this because it is challenging to sit down and create a ton of content at once. But when you can do it, it makes such a difference. And then use a content calendar to really help you kind of map things out, right? So in a month, you might say, all right, I want to publish 2 podcast episodes and I want 1 Instagram post a week and I want 1 email newsletter a week and I want 1 long form blog post in the month. You're going to figure out what cadence is going to work best for you. But the key is mapping it out and ideally really leaning into those content pillars that we talked about earlier. This is really about framing it for yourself to make it a lot easier to create the right content. You could say, okay, March is my month to go really deep on this one content pillar. So again, we'll come back to that example of you're a coach for busy moms. So March is your time management month. We're talking about time management. That's all we're talking about. And we're going to go deep on it. And we're going to talk about different angles of it. We'll talk about it in blog posts and we'll talk about it in podcast episodes and we'll talk about it in YouTube videos and we'll talk about it in Instagram Reels. There's so many different ways that we can talk about this and it all can stem from one piece of content. So if you record a podcast episode on this topic, but you go really deep, all right, well, now you have a lot of content to work with. Batching your content is going to make a huge difference. And it's going to make it so that you don't just feel like you're scrambling at the last minute all the time. Because you know what happens when you're scrambling at the last minute all the time? You're not always going to scramble. You're going to wake up one day and say, crap, I haven't posted anything on LinkedIn for the last 2 months. When did that happen? How did that happen? Right? And if LinkedIn is a really important platform for you, well, you just missed a lot of opportunities. And we don't want that to happen, right? We want to constantly be nurturing the platforms that are important for us and the audiences that are important for us so that we continue to have that strong pipeline and so that you're just not in that feast or famine cycle all the time. So to recap, know your ideal client, define your content pillars, choose your platforms and formats, repurpose like a pro, and batch your content. So how did these 5 steps lead us to a sustainable content marketing plan that you can manage while working on client work, while doing all the other pieces of running your business? Well, when you know exactly who your ideal client is and where they're hanging out, you're not trying to be everywhere all the time. You're only spending your effort on the platforms that are most important for your clients, for your goals. You're not just posting on Facebook because everyone says that you have to post on Facebook, right? You don't need to be posting on every platform. You only need to be posting on the platforms where your dream clients are hanging out. So that just makes it a lot easier and it decreases the overwhelm that comes along with this idea that I have to post everywhere and be everywhere all the time. When you're clear on your content pillars, it gives you a framework for always knowing what you need to be posting about. You don't need to be reinventing the wheel all the time. You don't need to be coming up with new content ideas constantly. It's okay to post about the same thing over and over and over again. As an old coworker of mine used to say, repetition doesn't spoil the prayer. People often need to hear things again and again and again before they actually respond to something. And that decreases the overwhelm of always having to come up with new ideas. You don't always have to come up with new ideas. As long as you are clear on your 3 to 5 pillars, and like I said, sometimes it's 1 to 3 pillars. Just really identify what are the things that you can go really deep on, what are the things that you can talk about again and again and again. And those are going to be your core content pillars that drive all the content that you put out into the world. Getting clear on not just which platforms you're hanging out on, but also which formats you really enjoy and which formats are going to form the basis of your content repurposing, which we'll talk about in a second. That's going to just ease that pressure. If you don't feel like I have to create content that I hate creating, just lean into the things that you actually enjoy creating. That's going to make it a lot easier to stay consistent with it. And it's not going to be this constant struggle to stay on top of it. Content repurposing is going to change the game for you. I promise you. When you start to learn how to create one core piece of content and then create lots of other pieces of content from that, it makes your life so much easier. Again, this is not about creating tons of new content all the time. You can create one piece of content and then lots of content comes from that, and it makes your life so much easier. And then having a really clear plan, planning in advance, batching content, this is just going to make it so much easier to stay on top of things. If you've planned your content for the month and you have much of it done already, you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the month while you're working on your client work, right? You can set aside one day a month to work on your content. And if that's all you're focused on for that day, you can knock a lot out. So all of these ideas together are going to make it so much easier, so much less overwhelming to stay consistent with your content, stay on top of things while you're managing your client work, while you're managing the boring pieces of running a business, right? Your accounting and bookkeeping and all of that stuff that I think most of us hate doing, but it's necessary, right? There are so many different parts of running a business, and your content does not need to be a stressful and overwhelming and awful part of it. It can be fun, it can be enjoyable, and it can be totally, totally manageable. I want to say one last thing on this. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of content that you need to keep your business going and keep it growing, you're not alone. Seriously. I think that every single small business owner that I've ever spoken to struggles with this. It's really, really hard. You're juggling so much. That overwhelm is something that I was seeing in all of my clients, right? They would hire me to do their branding and website, and then they'd have this beautiful website, but we need to be putting content out there to drive traffic to the website, right? If you create a beautiful website and you're not driving traffic to it, it's kind of a waste. But they were getting so overwhelmed by all the content that they needed to create to do that successfully. And I just kept sitting there thinking, how can I help them? I hate when I see my clients struggling with something and I know that I can help them and I can't yet figure out how, but I figured it out. And that is something that I call my bold day of content, which is basically you can book me for a day and it can be just a one-time thing. It can be a once a month thing. It can be twice a month, depending on your content needs. And basically I just knock out your content for you. We figure out what are the things that you need most this month, and I get it done for you. It's very little time on your part. It's taken off your plate. And at the end of this one day, you have all the content you need for a month. Sometimes people hire me for this day to tackle other pieces of their content, right? They need copy for a landing page, or they have an email sequence that they really need to work on, or they need help creating a lead magnet. It can be used in a lot of different ways, but it can also be used for your ongoing content marketing. If you're struggling with this constant cycle of putting out your content, dealing with client work, and putting your content marketing on hold, and then having to start back at square one, and this goes round and round and round and round. I've been there. It's really frustrating. Having some help tackling your content marketing while you're dealing with the client work can be so helpful in just kind of easing that pressure from you. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can go check it out at honeybeebold.com/BDOC. That's for bold day of content. And then you can just set up a quick call with me and we can talk through how this might look for your business. Thanks so much for listening today. See you next time. All right, beautiful human. That's a wrap on this episode of Bold Women in Business. This episode was brought to you by my company, Honey Bee Bold, with music by Shmukulele. But before you go, don't forget to take the Content Marketing Power Type quiz at honeybeebold.com/quiz, because when your content fits your power type, showing up gets way easier and your marketing actually starts working for you. Until next time, stay bold, stay kind, and keep doing it your way.